Hi there, and welcome to MiWeek, the only news and political analysis show you have to watch to be smart at your next cocktail party. I'm Christy McDonald. Our contributors Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press and Nolan Finley of the Detroit News are here. And it feels like, we're a broken record, but good grief. The presidential race is taking on another major twist. Republicans are running for cover. WikiLeaks is spilling emails. New polls are out about Michigan. We're going to talk about it all. Also coming up, we're going to take a look at some other issues on the ballot, including regional transit and the Detroit benefits proposals. Plus, will Governor Snyder face a grand jury over legal bills tied to Flint? We've got some headlines to cover there as well. So it is all coming up for you. But let's start with a closer look tonight at what Donald Trump calls his campaign now that he's free of the Republican shackles. Just how many lawmakers won't endorse him now, including our Michigan delegation? And does it really matter at this point? So let's bring in Nolan and Stephen. Guys, we come here every Thursday on MiWeek, and we think, oh, maybe we'll talk about the debate that happens, but the debate seems so long ago compared to the news cycle that's surrounding Donald Trump in this presidential election and the heartburn that I feel about discussing it every single day. What are your thoughts about what's happening this entire week?
Well, I mean, it's as you said, it's hard to keep up with. It's crazy time. It goes back and forth. You can't print a paper fat enough to get it all in. And this has been one of the most remarkable weeks since last Friday that I've ever seen in politics. I mean, you start out with the Donald Trump sex tape and the immediate reaction to that. The Republicans sort of turning their back on him, and then him going to war with his own party. He says, well, I'm going to run on he's a Republican nominee. And he said, I don't need you Republicans. I'm going to run on my own.
I think what's kind of weird, though, is some people are scuttling back. They're like, well, I'm going to pull my endorsement. And then like 3 days later, they say, well, I did a pretty good job at the debate. I think I'm back in. And now then the bombshell of being accused of sexual harassment of these women. I mean, Stephen, there are no words at times.
Well, there are. I mean, I think we're seeing a meltdown of a candidate of a major party candidate that we have not seen since 1964, likely, in terms of just how
this is worse than
the wheels come off and maybe heads that person for an unprecedented drubbing at the ballot box. I mean, the question by November 8th may be how low can his totals go, and of course, how much does that affect other races around the country? I mean, can you get so few Republicans excited to even come out to vote that that Democrats take over in state legislatures and things like that? I also think that this is an incredible moral test for the Republican Party and its leadership, its elected officials. I mean, this question of, oh, well, I'm endorsing him. No, I'm not. I'm back in. I'm out. I mean, I think it makes them look, first of all, it makes them look weak. But second of all, I mean, it is a failure of that test. There is no question about this person, what he stands for, what he's saying, what he would do to sort of fundamental values about this country. There shouldn't be a public official in the country who's unclear about, hey, I'm out.
Yeah, but you keep hearing Republicans say, and Nolan, let me ask you for your input on this. You keep hearing them say, well, it's not really about Donald Trump right now. It's about the Republican values, and it's about the Supreme Court, and it's about filling vacancies that are going to be coming up on the Supreme Court in the next 4 years.
I think mostly what you're hearing him say this week is, I'm not going to defend him anymore. I'm not going to campaign for him anymore. But you have a lot of people, particularly these congressional races, and if you look at our poll today, you start to see the impact on Republican congressional candidates and perhaps even state house candidates. They're really between a rock and a hard place. Whichever way they go, it's political suicide. If they say we're not going to vote for Trump, we're not endorsing Trump, and some have. You have this 30-some% of Republican voters, you're going to lose. If you say you're going to lose, the other percentage. These guys are in a real hard place. I haven't seen any congressman in Michigan pull their endorsement. I've saw Fred Upton called for him to step off the ticket.
Well, he never endorsed him to begin with.
He never endorsed him to begin with, nor did Governor Snyder, nor did a lot of folks.
Yeah, but you saw Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley coming out and saying we need to all rally around Trump, and he was the one who openly backed off and said, you know what? No, I'm not endorsing him. I'm not voting for him.
He pulled his endorsement, but he's not up this year. And you got a lot of people who in the Republican Party who understand Trump's going to lose and is going to lose by epic numbers, and they're trying to hold on to a Congress because the last thing they want is have both the presidency and both chambers of Congress in Democratic hands. And to a certain extent, they've got to keep that presidential number as close as they can to avoid that sort of row.
So let me ask you this. So you said something about political suicide. So it's kind of like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Stephen, let me ask you this though. Don't you want to be? It almost kind of looks at it like the right side of history on this.
Yeah, right.
So if you're going to go down in flames,
question.
what side do you want to go down on?
Right. Think of the people in our history who have stood on the wrong side of history and how they are remembered now. Bull Connor standing in the schoolhouse door saying, "No, we don't need segregation. We'll have." We don't need desegregation. We'll have segregation forever. I mean, Barry Goldwater going down the way he did in 1964. This is a test of the Republican Party. And if my fear is if they fail this test, it is such an important test of their character. And there are so many issues that divide the country so bitterly. I mean, I made the comparison in a column this week to the failure of the Whigs to deal with significant moral issues from a moral standpoint and a practical standpoint, which killed the party and led to the Republican Party in the first place.
Republicans aren't going to suddenly surge into the Democratic camp. I mean, they're fighting to save their party. I think it's a lost fight. I think this party is doomed after this election and is going to have to come back as something else.
What do you mean by that? And what does that look like if they have to come back as something else?
I think they're going to have to take this Trump contingent, this sort of rump group that controlled the primaries throughout, and they're going to have to find a way to separate themselves, or they can never lose because they're going to win because they're always going to be at war with themselves. And if you look,
or there's only what 31% of them, or 30%.
I mean, they're a minority. They're a minority.
Yeah, but they were in minority all the way through the primaries, and they nominated the presidential candidate.
Think how far we've come with this party just in less than 2 decades. In 2000 and 2004, George Bush carried almost 40% of the Hispanic vote. He got more African American votes than Republicans had gotten in a long time. Nowhere close to a majority, but he was making inroads with these constituencies that have defied the Republican Party. And those are constituencies that are growing. There are more black voters in states like North Carolina, which we see is going to probably be blue. Georgia is close to that tipping point this time. Hispanics Latino voters are tipping states like New Mexico and Colorado and maybe Arizona. Without doing that, without going back to that direction that the party was headed, not that George W. Bush was the favorite of any of those people, but he was a more palatable candidate, particularly on moral issues like immigration, particularly on moral issues like race. He was not in this camp of either Donald Trump or the weak-kneed apologists who say, well, it's the party, and I got to support the party, so I can't stand up.
And I think it's interesting that you say that because, you know, Nolan, we talked a lot about coming out of 2012, that the Republicans kind of wrote down this manifesto of what we need to do going forward to change our party a bit so we can gain more traction. And I feel like they threw that book out the window a long time ago.
And they lost control of the party. The Republican establishment is not controlling this election. They're sitting on the sidelines being dictated to. Several things interesting in our poll today, though. Only 68% of Republicans support Donald Trump or say they will vote for Donald Trump. No candidate can win with that little support amongst your own party. Only 40% of independents, only 1 in 4 women. I mean, this is the worst poll I've ever seen for a major party political candidate. And yet, one of the more intriguing things about this poll is, as Donald Trump's support has fallen off, he fell to 30% in this poll, which is
right, which is really interesting because Nolan and I were on CNN 2 weeks ago talking about how Michigan, it was after your other poll came out, talking about or the Free Press poll actually, how Michigan was in play here, and the change in numbers really is staggering.
It's been a disaster. But if you look at as Donald Trump's number has eroded here, those voters have not gone to Clinton. Her number stayed exactly the same between the polling places. So I don't know where those voters are going or will they
Well, I mean,
where
she's
they will go on election day.
She got an 11-point lead here in Michigan now.
But her number
up
hasn't
from
changed.
5. She's got, well.
But that's totally Donald Trump's collapse, not her gain.
I think you're
so
seeing,
where will those voters who are leaving Trump go?
Well, they're going out of the sample. They're not going to vote. They're not going to vote for her.
And that's
but I think they won't show up.
And it's also weird that you still have like 11% undecideds too, because I'm saying, are you really
I know,
undecided?
so
Are you really undecided, or you just don't want to tell a pollster you're decided?
This may be an extraordinarily low turnout election, and again, I think that's very bad for Republican congressional candidates. You could see, we're 9-5 in this state now. I would predict that by November 9th, we're 7-7 or 8-6 even.
I want to ask really quick
What's
about.
the third district?
Well,
hang
you
on.
could lose the first. You could lose the seventh, and you could lose that.
Well,
race.
speaking of Mike Bishop, who was running for re-election, and talking about the Michigan delegation in terms of, oh my gosh, do we endorse Trump or not endorse Trump? He has said, now I'm not going to talk about it. Don't ask me any questions. Do you think it's still fair game for the press to ask him questions about everything that Donald Trump does?
Well, you have to. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to answer him, but that's pretty much the position Paul Ryan's taken, and that's sort of been the standard position. Just look, I'm not going to defend him anymore. And I think when a camera comes, when he does something or says something, and somebody puts a camera in front of you, just say, that's despicable. Like they did on Saturday. I don't think it hurt anybody to say on Saturday, we denounce his comments. And you had
I think they're going to have to say that, though, every day. I mean, because if you think that this is the end of it, we've got a month to go for the election.
Again, it's bigger than the election. If you don't stand up now, when are you going to stand up? When are you going to say something about all of these awful things, about the savagery he has unleashed on discrete populations in this country for months?
And that's why I think it's interesting that the tipping point, the point was when he was caught on tape talking about women, when you could backtrack to egregious things that he has said in the past.
Unbelievable.
Black people, back to the wall.
I'll tell you, after watching this, and we've been never Trump from the beginning,
right?
But after watching this and then seeing the WikiLeaks come back out and the contempt the Clinton camp has for the American electorate, we feel very good about our Gary Johnson endorsement. Aleppo.
He is looking up Aleppo frantically right now as we speak. But I don't want to leave this conversation though without talking about. I don't want to leave this conversation without talking about the WikiLeaks because I don't want to feel like that we're just all going to pile on Trump every week as well, because you still have these emails coming out, and while people say, well, there's really maybe not that much in it, it goes to lend this thought of, is she hiding something? And that is the big thing that has surrounded Hillary Clinton's campaign, I think, from the beginning, or people's trust of her or lack of there.
Well, what you see in these, I mean, you shouldn't have to be hiding anything. What you see in these is bad enough. And some of the things that are coming out in these WikiLeaks, if she were running against anybody other than Donald Trump, this would be a big deal, and it would hurt her campaign. It's this elitist attitude that's conveyed by Clinton and her team, their disdain for large groups of Americans, Catholics, evangelicals, today Hispanics, they take a crack at. I mean, it's sort of this I'm better than you attitude, and I'm sort of above the law, that reflects this, and it's what we've known about the Clintons for years. It's why even a lot of Democrats had reservations about her candidacy until they saw Donald Trump. And it would be interesting, Republicans ought to be beating themselves to death thinking we could have drawn almost anybody out of that 16-person pool, and we'd be riding high today, and we took Donald Trump.
And it's only because of Donald Trump. Do you think that these won't hurt her as much?
Oh, no. I mean, in this election, they won't matter at all.
No.
They're not even getting any, they can't get any air time or space to get discussed because of his constant, I mean, it's almost like he's rushing in front of the camera to say something else offensive or not very smart.
But what we should be
or he's tweeting in the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night about
Donald.
I mean, he's really lost control.
I mean, he's Lonesome Rhodes in a face in a crowd. I mean, he has just completely lost it. But what we also should be concerned about ourselves in this WikiLeaks is the cozy relationship between her campaign and many members of the press and many media outlets. It really speaks poorly of our business.
She does like Lafayette, Coney Island, though. They did talk about that. I
or
think
one of her
staffers did like that. All right. I guess, as we take a look at this going forward, gosh, we've got another debate next week. Kind of give me what your thoughts are going forward in this next week and what we can look for.
I mean, I think the best you can hope for, the best Republicans can hope for, is that it doesn't get any worse. It's not going to get any better. This next debate, October 19th, right?
Right.
It's a Fox News debate. She's going to get harder questions for a change than he does. But he's so unpredictable and he's so unhinged. I think he can even lose a Fox News debate. And
Well, it's not even that he's losing the debates, he's not participating in them. I mean, what he's doing is attempting to hijack the debates with all of this other stuff that is A, not being asked about either candidate, but B, is so far afield from what I think people even want to have them discuss.
Well, he comes in unprepared.
Yeah, I mean,
and
he's
he
not,
comes in, and he doesn't seem to be listening. There are so many opportunities for him. She leaves him so many openings on the stage.
I think he's too busy concentrating on one-liners and zingers.
Yeah.
I think that's.
I mean, he's not participating in the debate process so much as he's up there doing a one-man show that he thinks will appeal to voters.
So you think he's going to have his own news network when this is all over? If he does not win, I got to put that out
I think
there.
his brand is
No,
probably
I don't
more
think
damaged
there's-
than the Republican brand.
I
after
think
this,
he's
right?
done. I don't think, there's a lot amongst conservatives, amongst Republicans, there's a lot of debate whether it'd be better if he just absolutely got crushed. And so you could say to those folks who hijacked the party,
See?
okay,
Yeah.
see, we told you so. Then if he, finishes a close race and you have to deal with these folks again, worst thing that can happen is that you make him into a martyr by trying to kick him off the ticket. Then he never goes away.